Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the 10th Annual Public Meeting of Canada's International Development Research Centre here in Ottawa, IDRC. My name is Margaret Biggs, and I'm the chairperson of the IDRC Board of Governors, and it's my pleasure to call this annual public meeting to order. First of all, a few housekeeping items. We will conduct the meeting in our two official languages, and so headsets are available at the back of the room should you wish to have simultaneous translation. And the meeting is also being recorded for future use. Des écouteurs pour une interprétation.
So headsets are in the back of the room, and the meeting is also being video recorded for future use.
Ultérieurement. So we have an engaging lineup. We have a really exciting topic to introduce you to this evening. You'll hear a little bit about IDRC's work this past year, how IDRC is fitting into Canada's foreign and international assistance policy, and some of the changes that are happening in the world and the implications for the Global South. And as you know, the success of IDRC is very much built on the strength of its team. And many of the IDRC staff team and management team are here this evening. And they're the special sauce that makes IDRC so successful over the years. It's their ability, your ability to spot emerging opportunities and risks, to guide and mentor research organizations and researchers that you're working with, to help leaders adapt and to scale innovations, to have impact, and really to make IDRC an organization that makes Canada proud on the world stage. And we often do get questions about the visibility of IDRC here in Canada, and we're working on that too, and in many circles IDRC is extremely well known. But we also know that IDRC is very well known in many parts of the world. It's one of the first things that comes to mind with many policymakers and decision makers because of the influence over the decades that IDRC's had in terms of growing expertise and research, decision makers, leaders in many of those societies. So thank you to everybody from IDRC staff and management team the role you play, and for distinguishing Canada's contribution in terms of research for development. And I also want to thank IDRC's Board of Governors and the governors who are with you today. They dedicate their time and their expertise and their commitment to Canada's role in the world, to international global development, by their governance and their oversight and stewardship at the Centre. So it's my pleasure just to mention that we welcome 5 new governors this year who were appointed by the Minister through Cabinet in May. And they're here with us. We have Akwasi Edu. I'd like you to stand if you don't mind, please. And Alex Awiti. And Gilles Rivard. And Stephen Toop. And a 5th is Purnima Mane, who's not able to be with us today. One of the interesting things, you see, our new governors are from living and working in different parts of the world, so it adds a tremendous diversity and richness to IDRC's deliberations. Now, one of our governors, Shaynur Koja, had her term renewed for a second 3-year term, so Shaynur is also here. And it's great to have that continuity. We had 3 governors whose terms came to a close over the course of the last year: Alana Boyd, Scott Gilmore, and Uri Rosenthal. We've had a chance at the board level to thank them for their contributions, but I'd just like to publicly thank them for the contributions that they made, the frankness of their advice, what they did to help to contribute to strengthen IDRC's governance and oversight. We also have with us here today some of my notes say long-standing, but they don't feel that they're that veteran, but some of our governors who have been with us for two and a half years now. And if I can introduce them and ask them to stand as well. Our Vice Chairperson Chandra Madhamuto. We have Barbara Trenholm, who's the chair of our Finance and Audit Committee. Madame Marianne Chambers, who's the chair of our Human Resources Committee. John MacArthur, who's the chair of our Strategy, Program, Performance and Learning Committee. And we have Dominique Corti over here. And of course, also a member of the Board of Governors, IDRC's President and CEO, Jean Lebel. Turning to Jean, Jean was appointed to a 5-year mandate in May of this year as IDRC president, and he had served as well since 2003, but he's now has a 5-year mandate from the Government of Canada and from the board. Congratulations, a huge congratulations to Jean, and he's raring to go on another 5-year plan. So, the theme in the most recent IDRC annual report is empowerment through research. And empowerment is really fundamental, has been fundamental over the years to everything that IDRC's done. But I think we're putting a little bit more of a point on it right now. People are empowered when they have the knowledge, the resources, the agency they need to make decisions and take actions that can improve their lives, their livelihoods, and the lives of their communities and their families. And this year's annual report shines a particular light on advancing economic empowerment. And you can look at the report on the website. And it particularly focuses on empowerment as that intersects with another focus for IDRC, which was really much around gender. The Government of Canada has put equality of women and girls at the centre of its foreign policy and of its international assistance. And I think IDRC has similarly, over the years, has placed gender and has a really central role in looking at gender in the context of research for development. Completely consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals, which has advancing economic growth, inclusive economic growth that works for everyone, and of course, a very strong focus around SDG 5, which is around equality for women and girls. So for growth to work for everyone, to be inclusive, to be truly inclusive, it has to be transformational in terms of women's economic empowerment, one that prioritizes eliminating the structural, social, political barriers that prevent women from achieving their full and equal economic rights. This is an area that IDRC has worked on a great deal in the past. Tomorrow at our board meeting, we're talking about a distillation of what we've learned from that at IDRC over the years, and it is a priority for this year and will be, I would predict, a priority for the coming years. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our President and CEO, Jean Lebel, who's going to speak about IDRC's programming approach to gender, as well as IDRC's priorities and accomplishments. And then we will have a presentation from an IDRC leader in the area of artificial intelligence, Matthew Smith, and I will introduce him in a minute. So first of all, Jean.
Thank you, Margaret. Merci beaucoup, Margaret. Welcome, everyone. Bonsoir à tous.
Good evening, all.
Don't slide. Good. Thanks for being here tonight. Bienvenue. Merci d'être ici ce soir. I would really like to open by recognizing IDRC's Board of Governors, as Margaret has introduced them, and Margaret herself as the chair of the board for, the leadership that is provided to IDRC and the strategic guidance that is quite vital for creating a lasting impact worldwide. And I can say from seeing it from close, this is an exceptional board, and it's a fully constituted board. And for me, this is probably one of the biggest success of this year. So, Margaret and the board, thank you very much. Mais j'aimerais aussi reconnaître.
I would also like to recognize in the room all my colleagues that are staff at IDRC. All the employees here really represent the motor of IDRC. And the work that they do, that you do, is really beneficial for us and for people for whom we're working in developing countries. I'm pleased to present to you today some stories of change that were made possible thanks to the research funded by IDRC. I will talk to you about the importance of IDRC's presence on the ground and the way that we focus our vision on gender equality or gender issues.
My first story is about Zipporah Mutuni. She lives in Korogocho, an informal settlement in Nairobi, Kenya. After the birth of her daughter, she had trouble finding a job while balancing childcare. Many days she made the equivalent of about 20 Canadian cents. Zipporah's challenge is sadly common. Child care costs prevent many women from pursuing their economic potential. Zipporah was among more than 1,200 mothers who participated in the randomized controlled trial. That's an experiment. It tested whether improving the affordability and quality of childcare services in poor urban environments increases the participation of women in economic activities. The result: affordable childcare freed many of the women to pursue employment. Their earnings increased, and so did their savings. Zipporah is now working and using childcare. She saved up enough money to move from a single room to a larger rented house. And this project was part of the Growth and Economic Opportunity for Women that we call internally GROW. IDRC is always good on acronym. GROW supported 14 projects related to women's economic empowerment across 50 countries with the support of IDRC funding as well as the Hewlett Foundation funding. This past year, we celebrated GROW as the program came to an end. And you can learn more about GROW at the web link on the screen. La deuxième histoire d'impact porte.
The second story has to do with Winnie Butsigia. She lives in Uganda, the country of our governor, Dominique Courty. 4 years ago, Winnie and her family were living in a house with no floor and with a thatched roof. She had a few cows to produce milk, but not enough to get decent income. In 2014, Winnie got some training on a cheap way to process some probiotic yogurt with thanks to freeze-dry bacteria. This changed her life. She started to sell that yogurt to her neighbors and to the local shopping center. And as her sales increased, she purchased milk from other farmers. And today, Winnie is in charge of a women's group, the Camiro Group, in the Kiboga district, who produces daily between 150 and 200 liters of probiotic yogurt. Winnie earns $4,500 Canadian dollars per month. She hires 27 women and young people. She helps train other women and contributes to food security of her community. She's part of the 700,000 women in 24 countries who, in the past 10 years, benefited from the Canadian Research Fund on International Food Security of IDRC, who will come to an end this year. It was also supported by World Affairs Canada. We also celebrated in the past year the accomplishments of this program. We held an event in Ottawa in October, a 2-day event, and Winnie was present, and her story inspired our history, as it was the case last year for our governors who met Winnie during a site visit in Uganda. You can learn more about this on our internet site.
These are made possible by IDRC's on-the-ground presence, particularly through our regional offices. The regional offices in India, Jordan, Kenya, and Uruguay are vital. They build capacity, make sure IDRC support for research is targeted to country-level contexts, and they maintain strong relationships. In February, IDRC signed a memorandum of understanding with the government of India. This agreement enables Canada to continue supporting important research in India and the Asian region, where IDRC solely in India has supported nearly 600 projects since 1974. We also signed a host country agreement with the government of Jordan. And we are now opening a new regional office in Jordan, in Amman, and this is reconfirming our commitment to supporting research that changed lives in the Middle East and North Africa. These regional offices enhances IDRC's ability to do effective field work that incorporates local knowledge to respond to challenge and to build bridges between the local context and the global priorities and frameworks. Which brings me to the point of gender. We have a long history of working on gender, but there is much still to be done. We are looking at how to leverage our experience to improve the lives of women and girls worldwide, to support other actors in our sector, and to help Canada deliver on its Feminist International Assistance Policy. One of the ways we are doing this is through examining our work on gender to better understand, deepen, and position our approach to gender transformative research. J'aimerais vous faire part d'un exemple de la manière dont la...
Let me give you an example of how the evidence-based research at IDRC removes structural barrier thanks to evidence, good evidence. The Civil Registration and Vital Statistics System Center is supported by us, and it supports the national efforts to develop, build, and adopt these civil registration and vital statistics. Reliable data are essential to develop policies and programs that benefit people that are ill-served and hard to reach. And the overwhelming majority of those are women. For instance, women, girls, and other vulnerable groups need a proof of age, of identity to work, to open a bank account, to get credit, or to have a business and vote. If you don't exist in a system, in such a civil registration system, you just don't exist. And you cannot have access to these services. If you are known, you are visible, and this gap, invisible gap, is one of our research priorities. I'll give you one last example from the Vietnamese province of Tay Nguyen. In the remote areas of Vietnam, the maternal death rate are almost 4 times higher than with ethnic minority groups. The project that I'm talking about use mobile phones to improve visibility of women belonging to ethnic minorities and their health needs. By establishing communication between hundreds of women, childbearing age women, with health professionals of the municipality, thanks to those mobile phones, they receive text messages including information, health information. So the system is directly connected to the provincial health management information system, which allow an analysis of their information and improve evidence-based planning. These women are now recognized, and now their needs are more likely to be taken into account in the funds and health services.
We share examples like this and learn from the works of others. And we will synthesize learning. For example, we will participate in the Women Deliver Conference in Vancouver next spring. This is the world's largest conference on gender equality and the health, rights, and well-being of women and girls. We are also hosting gender-focused public event here in Ottawa. The next one is this Thursday at the Ottawa Marriott Hotel, 1 p.m. It will be on data, women and girls, and Margaret will be moderating the discussion. Yeah, way to go. We hope to see you there. This focus on gender is contributing to broader discussion we are having with the board that will influence IDRC next strategic plan. And we look forward to keeping you informed on that front. Je tiens à souligner que nous terminons cette année.
I would conclude by saying that we had a very productive year with very good outlooks for the future. It is the case, actually, for 2020. The year 2020, not my eyesight. So this year will be very important for us.
Celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Centre, but it will be also the year that we will launch our new strategic plan. We are planning this occasion for celebration that will bring attention on the power of impact of research, and the power of impact of research for development. Nous espérons vous participer.
We hope you will take part in this celebration. Have a look at our website over the year and our newsletters, our social media to get other news on that.
Is quite important for us. And it's one of the features of IDRC to anticipate and due foresight on what's coming down our way from developing region of the world, but also from our world. And what a better segue for putting back the microphone to you, Margaret, given that our next speaker really takes a step forward looking, talking of artificial intelligence. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Jean.
Thank you very much, Jean.
Introduced to you IDRC's Matthew Smith. Matthew's the acting program leader for IDRC's work in the Networked Economies program, and he's been with the Centre for a decade, for more than a decade. He leads the Centre's team that looks at the opportunities and the risks of digital innovations in developing countries. I think he's also been stolen from the British Isles. He's got a degree in artificial intelligence from the University of Edinburgh and a PhD in information systems from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Did we steal you? You're British?
No, I'm not.
You're Canadian? Excellent. So Matthew has been managing and conducting research in this field of technology vis-a-vis international development for more than 15 years. He was the co-author of this white paper on artificial intelligence that was released earlier this year in June at the Conférence de Montréal. He's a leader in this area, and he's going to brief us on artificial intelligence, the opportunities and the risks for global development, for developing countries, and what IDRC can do and is doing to advance knowledge, understanding, and policy solutions in the global south. So Matthew, over to you.
Bonjour et bonsoir.
Hello, good evening. I'm a program official in the technology and innovation program, and I'm delighted to be here to talk to you about artificial intelligence and its potential for human development, based on the report that we wrote this year. In simple terms, artificial intelligence, or AI, is a discipline that attempts to improve the performances of machines in areas that are typically human, such as decision-making or forecasting, processing of language, recognition of models, and the optimization of solutions. This is perhaps very useful in situations such as this one for an Anglophone, such as myself. It's true, Matthew. You're familiar. You know that the AI applications can do much more than translating a language. Did you know that artificial intelligence can beat World Go, chess, and Jeopardy champions, diagnose heart disease, and predict your emotional states and drive your cars? IA is revolutionary. It seems it's the best business occasion that exists today. They estimate that by 2030, AI will increase the global GDP by $15.7 trillion. That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
That was, of course, Google Translate, one of the better-known AI applications. In fact, all of the French up until this point was the result of Google translating English into French. So perhaps some of the Francophones among you noticed kind of the odd phrasings that were in there. But AI wasn't always so impressive. In 1999, I did a master's in artificial intelligence long before there was a Google Translate. Since then, I've studied and worked in the area of research, technology, and international development. And in all those years, I've never thought it was important or relevant to focus on AI. In my own experience with AI, when you look under the hood, it's not as impressive as you might think. But a lot has changed over the last 18 years. In particular, the increase in computational power and the ability to gather massive amounts of data have driven some of the spectacular advances we have seen and we hear about today. It has also powered some troubling developments that also dominate the news. And while writing this report, this Jekyll and Hyde nature of AI took me on an emotional roller coaster of sorts, from excitement to concern and to hope, that I will take you through in this talk. Excitement. While our AI future is still unwritten, what is clear is that AI is going to be transformative. AI is a set of foundational technologies, often working behind the scenes, upon which revolutionary new ways of working, organizing, and production can be built. This transformation is going to happen in the Global South, where the scope for benefits is large. AI technologies bring exciting opportunities to help tackle some key challenges the world faces today. Consider education. Currently, 103 million young people aged 18 to 25 worldwide lack basic literacy skills, and more than 60% of them are women. AI has a role to play in advancing quality education at scale. For example, AI-embedded learning software, such as adaptive educational games and intelligent tutoring systems, can enable high-quality, personalized learning to anyone with sufficient access to the technology. Or consider agriculture. On the slides, you can see an AI application that diagnoses disease in cassava plants from mobile phone images. This application, developed by a lab in Uganda, can directly benefit smallholder farmers whose livelihoods are highly vulnerable to such diseases. A similar approach has been used to develop an application that recognizes malaria in blood samples. This system outperforms standard antibody tests, which tend to produce high rates of false positives. AI applications can also move beyond diagnosis to recommending treatment protocols. So we can imagine a near future where an AI application based on a smartphone, perhaps supported by a community health worker, can play the role of a doctor, delivering high-quality health care at low costs to remote populations. These examples illustrate how AI can be extremely valuable as it directly addresses shortages in expertise in heretofore high-cost equipment. Concern. However, all technologies come with a downside, and the power of AI makes this downside all the more worrisome. It is not that AI is inherently bad or problematic. Rather, it is the context of its use that shapes these outcomes. Unfortunately, it appears that AI is poised to increase inequality and instability in the Global South. This is primarily because the current context is one of tremendous inequality between and within countries and among different socioeconomic classes, genders, and ethnicities. This inequality will shape AI innovations and who they will benefit or harm. In this talk, I will focus on the inequality embodied in the AI divide. The AI divide has multiple levels. I'll mention just two. The first is a technology infrastructure divide. Despite the rapid spread of mobiles and broadband, about 4 billion people are still without internet access. If AI leverages the infrastructure of computational power, the connectivity of the internet, and big data, what happens with AI in these vastly uneven distributions of this infrastructure? This infrastructure divide also manifests as a data divide, where data sets required to train machine learning algorithms are often collected in the global north and therefore neither appropriate nor even available in the Global South. Data itself can also reflect inequalities. This happens when data is underrepresentative, incomplete, or captures economic, social, and cultural biases. If AI is trained on these data sets, then the AI learns and subsequently reproduces those biases. For example, you might have recently heard about Amazon's AI-powered recruiting technology that was trained predominantly on men's CVs. Unsurprisingly, it was biased against women applicants. Or, for example, consider the AI application in Florida that predicts the probability of a criminal reoffending. This application is used to inform life-altering decisions such as sentencing and parole. An analysis of the risk scores given by this application revealed that it wrongly labeled black defendants as future criminals at twice the rate of white defendants. The second level of the AI divide is the capacities to design, develop, and use AI technologies. And this includes institutional capacities, particularly within governments, to effectively regulate new technologies or protect human rights that might come under threat. And we can imagine, I think, how the AI divide might shape the rollout and outcomes of AI in the Global South. Recall the estimated 15.7 trillion in GDP gains from AI mentioned earlier by our Google Translate friend. The bulk of it, 10.7 trillion, is estimated to accrue to North America and China. Only 1.7 trillion goes to the Global South, or just about 11%. And what about predictions of job loss? A 2016 World Bank report estimates that 2/3 of all jobs in developing countries are susceptible to automation. Furthermore, the countries most at risk may also be the least equipped to implement necessary social protection measures. Finally, the AI divide means the social, political, and economic challenges in the Global South are not high on the AI research and development agenda. Now, this paints a rather bleak picture, and I haven't even mentioned some of the other very real risks, such as how AI can empower digital dictators and other bad actors through supercharged surveillance, or enable highly targeted misinformation and manipulation campaigns. Hope. We are undoubtedly at the dawn of a new era, of an AI future still to be written. The analysis presented here may be sober, but it is also critical to move ahead eyes wide open. Importantly, so I'm not misunderstood, this is not a rejection of AI. Indeed, I believe it would be irresponsible to ignore the potential of AI to promote human well-being, such as through improved agricultural outcomes and greatly enhanced health care for remote groups. Rather, the report seeks a way forward wherein locally relevant, accountable, and ethical AI applications are able to flourish and contribute to advancing our collective sustainable development goals. The report highlights several areas where supporting research and research to policy capacity can play an important role in shaping this future. At IDRC, we have found that getting out ahead of emerging technologies is key. We do this by building local capacities to generate evidence that informs innovations, regulations, and social policies. And when we do so, we found that governments can be quite receptive to research and evidence. It is critical, however, that any approach we take involves a wide range of stakeholders and perspectives. The dramatic social implications of AI means that AI cannot be left to the techies and the technology companies alone. We need people across the spectrum to understand and participate, including those who will be impacted by the technologies. So what is IDRC doing? Well, actually, we have been supporting research involving AI for a while, just under some different names. For example, we have supported research that uses big data sets from mobile phone operators to study how it can facilitate the formulation of development policy. However, now we want to focus more directly on the opportunities and challenges of AI. And we are starting several lines of work to address the AI divide. The first is launching a network of excellence in sub-Saharan Africa. We recently did a quick mapping of actors engaging in AI across the Global South. The image on the slide represents sub-Saharan Africa. What is immediately apparent, particularly in the middle bar, in the academic space, is how much interest and burgeoning capacity there is in the region. The Network of Excellence will be the first such regional network to connect machine learning researchers with social scientists, ethicists, development actors, policymakers, and sources of funding. Second, we are working to improve education in the Global South. While children need to learn facts and how to code, they also need to develop abilities of problem solving, thinking outside the box, continuous learning, and the resiliency to handle change and maintain mental balance in light of a rapidly changing and unpredictable world. Third, we are engaging with other like-minded funders to set up an AI for Development initiative with a research to policy and capacity building mandate. Now, these interventions are not intended as a short-term fix. Rather, they are the beginning of a long-term plan to build local, individual, and organizational capacity to ensure ethical development and deployment of AI applications for the public good. Personally, I still vacillate amongst the emotions. I get excited when I hear about new AI applications and how they can be applied in development. But I keep a healthy skepticism of the limits of these technologies. And I'm also concerned about the future and the potential for AI to increase inequality and instability in the global south. However, I mostly feel energized and hopeful when I think about how IDRC can play a role to reduce the AI divide and to help forge a better AI future for all. And I hope after this talk, you do too. Thank you.
That was super. Thank you very much, Matthew. That was a tremendous presentation, teasing us with what you know. So obviously, as you said, the opportunities for artificial intelligence are significant. They're hugely transformative potentially, and there's no doubt that it can be harnessed for the public good. Many of the key challenges that IDRC has worked on for some time: education, healthcare, food security, agriculture. But you also talked about the potential risks and the downsides. And in particular, that AI can magnify, amplify existing inequalities and instability in the global south. I learned a new word, digital dictators. That's good. Supercharged surveillance. We didn't really get into that, but I think we know what you're getting at there. So this is hugely important work, and as you said, with technology, you can't. Well, one, you got to try to stay with it or ahead of the curve a bit, but also you can't just leave it to technologists, as wonderful as they are. And this is a great example of how IDRC's work can invest in the leading edge research, but also engaging people who are going to be impacted by these disruptive forces. So now it's open to you. C'est à votre tour. We're happy to answer any questions you have. This would be the panel here, of course, all to Matthew. Questions that you may have. Nous serons heureux de...
We will be happy to answer your questions in English or French. I'd repeat, you have to use the headsets that you can use for simultaneous interpreting if you have questions or comments. There are mics. We're not a huge...
If you have a question or comment, please introduce yourself and then your question. And we welcome questions to any of us here at the panel, Jean, myself, and Matthew. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to Matthew. Over to you. Comments and questions.
I'm Marianne Chambers. I'm an IDRC governor. Matthew, thank you very much for that presentation. I was hoping it was going to be as balanced as you did present. And my question is, you allude to the value of understanding how AI can affect the future and perhaps mitigate some of the risks that you referred to. And so I'm wondering if you can share with us any examples of projects that you anticipate that could be in our future, in our near future, in terms of balancing that risk or that divide.
Go ahead, answer that one. Yep. Well, I'll let other people rise up.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great question. And so I'm going to pause for a second and think about it. On a fundamental level for me, and the reason why I focused on the AI divide is because I also think that's the entry point for bringing about change. I mean, you hear a lot about social biases, for example, in the news, but I almost think that those are kind of tangential issues. Where for me, the core element is how can we build up that, and this is my IDRC bias, of course, how do we build up that institutional capacity in country, right, that can do the research and that can take that research, working with governments and bringing it into policy. There's so many unanswered questions in terms of how are we going to regulate this? We don't even know how to think about it. We don't know, no one agrees on the scope of job loss that will come, right? You ask 10 economists, you get 10 different answers. Or so it seems. I'm not an economist. But so for me, that's my entry point, and that's why I focus so much on the AI divide in particular. I hope that's...
So I was just wondering if you have in mind any kinds of that might help to manage that risk?
Well, okay, so that's also a good question. And I don't actually have anything specific in mind, right? But I do think that there is a lot to be learned about how you design and develop and deploy these applications in different contexts that will help to mitigate that. And I think there's actually a lot of work going on right now about participatory design techniques, bringing in people. That's why I mentioned at the end, it's really important to be consulting people who will be impacted by these technologies, because that's not the first instinct of a lot of people developing these sorts of applications.
And I think, Matthew is spot on. But what is exceptional at IDRC is that our experience in other fields can help to better design, what will be our next generation of project in that field. I was talking about the richness about the employees. It's not a big organization, Marianne, as you know, we are, 360 something. Here in Ottawa, about 260. 0.8 is because I have a steel hip, so I lost 20%. In the field, we have about, a little less than 100 employees. So all these people, have a bunch of knowledge, not only in AI, but in other fields. I'll take the example in the technology sector. IDRC was at the forefront of the mobility. And back in the 80s and the 90s, we were investing a lot on the technology to reach. But then we realized that, there was crowding up that was taking place. Private sector was getting into this and was doing a very good job. But the affordability and the access was a limiting factor. So IDRC started to invest into the policy, on the tarification, on the access for everyone. And now, our programming has been concentrating over the last year about, the privacy, the role of technology in developing sustainability and inclusive growth. And out of this start to emerge, the AI. So the AI, as Matthew was saying, is not new. It was labeled differently, but it's part of this transition. And, when you are able to put the white paper like this together, there's a lot of thought that has been put in by him and a team. And when we released it in Montreal, it was the first time at Conférence de Montréal that IDRC had an event with over 200 people in the room, sitting in the staircase, and we made the news the day after in Le Devoir. Not because we were saying AI is the next best thing in the world. It's because of this, balanced view, risk, but also opportunity. So thank you for the comments, and thanks, Matt.
Any other comments or questions for the panel? No? I might have one. Oh, Nasser, please. And then Ekwasi, if you'd like. You have to go to the microphone, though.
Thanks. Thanks, Margaret. I was just going to, if you don't mind, sort of help answer Marianne's question. Marianne, in terms of kind of potential projects that will mitigate those risks, I think the first one is actually building the capacity to develop AI in the South. right? Because when you have those societies participating in the development, then it's less likely that you're going to have those built-in biases, right? Because you're developing it in context by people who understand the context. The second thing is documenting some of the potential risks, right? So Matthew talked about civil liberties, gave the example about AI being used in making decisions about parole or reoffending. You know, human rights, there's things in the news related to Myanmar, you know, undermining of human rights in other countries that are well documented. But I think that we need to do some more research in countries with the participation of researchers in countries to identify what some of those risks are. Democracy itself, right? And documenting what's actually happening so that civil society and other groups are aware of some of the potential risks. So unless you know what the risks are, you can't mitigate them. And so I think that's going to also be helpful. Then there's also opportunities to use technologies to actually counter some of the challenges. So we have a project with the Sentinel group, which is countering misinformation in the Tana River Delta in Kenya, which we're scaling out to Myanmar now. Where in an era of fake news where you don't know who to trust, you don't know what's actually valid and what's not, it's bringing human beings back into the equation, right? And it's bringing trusted people, tribal leaders, religious leaders, and so forth, that can, with the help of a team that investigates the rumors, then can come out and say, well, this is not true, and try to diffuse tensions before they actually start. So that's an example of a particular project that mitigates the risk. And then finally, I think that what's going to be critical is helping to build the capacity of governments to regulate, right? And look at things like oversight, which we're actually grappling with even here in Canada. You know, I mentioned this morning that the Canadian Immigration and Refugee Board there was a story on Sunday, is using AI to determine, you know, whether people should stay in Canada or go back to the countries they came from, and the potential risks of that, especially when it's not even an oral briefing. It's just something that's done via text and documents. And AI can kind of sift through that data but make mistakes because it's not in context and so forth. So I think that oversight role is going to be really important, and building the capacity of people in the South to determine how to regulate will also mitigate the risk. Thanks.
Thanks, Nasser. Akwasi.
Yes, thank you very much. From your presentation, I have an image in my mind of AI as a knife, which can be used for good or bad. But the really scary part is what often one reads in the media about the future of AI, the possibility of AI having an agency in itself. In other words, it's not just a knife that can be used by humans, but it's a knife that can move on its own and cause harm and take over, you know, the agency from humanity. And so, you know, I don't know, is that part of the risk? The future of AI taking over agency from humans? And indeed, perhaps endangering humanity.
So that's a good question. And if by taking over agency you mean that this sort of the idea of the singularity, right? That it suddenly develops a consciousness, and to be honest, I'm not worried about that at the moment. The interesting thing about AI is it's incredibly powerful, but it's actually quite narrow and brittle, right? It can do certain things really, really, really well, but that knowledge doesn't transfer to other domains, right? You can teach it to play chess, but then, you know, you want it to, you know, recognize an image. That particular algorithm can't make that transition. You have to totally train something very different for that very specific task. And actually, I think, so this is maybe a longer discussion, but I do think it's a risk eventually. but I think it's a problem to focus on it now, and that's because there are opportunity costs, right? I mean, right now, there's lots of really important challenges and opportunities that we need to focus on, and I think that is far enough away that it's not a real risk. There's a quote from a computer scientist who said, the problem actually is not that artificial intelligence will get too smart and take over the world. The problem is that it's too stupid and already has. So I think we need to focus on that narrow bit for now.
That was to reassure you. Yeah. One is tempted to ask what you really, really do stay awake at night worrying about, Matthew.
Is children waking up in the middle of the night?
That's number one. Yes, that's true. My children. So it's something I didn't touch on in the talk. Actually, you hear a lot about the risk of biased algorithms, right? I'm actually not worried about that really at all. I mean, I think it's problematic. I think there's a lot of attention on it, and we're learning a lot about how to overcome that. And in fact, that I think is an opportunity, because in a way it holds up to society. It's like a mirror, right? Whereas the bias was deep inside someone's head at one point, now you can see it, you can print it out, right? And that is very powerful. So I'm not worried about that. What actually worries me the most, I think, is this sort of political manipulation. And then the threat to liberal democracies, and it comes from different directions. One of them is through political manipulation, and the other one is through the potential of making people, rather than people with jobs, making them irrelevant, right? Because actually, what if you don't need people to hold a hammer? What if you don't need people to type in something, because that can be replaced? And then rather than people who are, forming a union or whatever, or protesting for their rights, they are actually irrelevant and then you worry about how liberal democracy sort of adjusts for that. But just on the political manipulation side, you guys might have heard of this particular piece of research. How many people here use Facebook? Okay, maybe about 50%. I don't anymore, actually. And how many of you when you like something on Facebook? How many do that, right? Oh, a couple people? Okay. Well, that's probably good, actually. And there's a really interesting experiment. This was in 2015 by, I think, Stanford and Harvard researchers, something like that, where they took, so those surveys you can take, for those of you on Facebook, you know about that. There's ones where it'll tell you your personality type, right? And so what they did is they got people to take these personality tests, and they also got all their Facebook data, right, and figured out what they liked. And so they tried to make a matching between the kinds of things that you like and your personality traits. It turns out that they can do that, and they can do it very well. And I have it somewhere, but it's like, then they also had people take surveys about your personalities, right? So they, it was like your spouse, people you work with, siblings, and your parents. And I wish I had the numbers right in front of me, but it's like, I do. It takes only 10 likes for the algorithm to be able to better predict your personality than a work colleague. So that just says something about work colleagues not really connecting, I guess. It takes 70 likes only to beat a roommate, 150 to beat a parent or sibling, and anyone want to guess how many it takes to beat your spouse? 300. So if you have liked 300 times on Facebook, it knows you better than probably you know yourself, which is fascinating. But if you think about it, that research took place in 2015, and we all know what happened right after 2015 with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So that, I guess, is what keeps me up at night and why I'm no longer on Facebook.
Thanks, Matthew. That brought it home. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, well then that ends the formal part of our meeting, our program. Je vous remercie d'avoir participé.
I thank you very much for participating.
Talk with governors, with staff, visitors. So thank you very much. Thank you again to Matthew for, we'll never sleep again. Thank you. Thank you for coming.